All right. Anyone here? I'll probably play another backing track just to kind of warm up a little bit. It's like one of those days where you run around like crazy and you get nothing done. So I did get my pedal board set up. Let me show you guys a picture. Let's see if I can do this without messing things up too much. Airdrop. Actually, there's got to be better ways of doing this. And you come in, let me know. We're going to talk about modes and cage system and stuff like that. I figured we kind of relax a little bit before we get started here. Send this to my computer. So this was kind of fun. I actually got to spend a little bit of time today. Oops. I knew this was going to be a... I'll get it there. I think there are ways to do this. Let's see, add a picture. There we go. So I literally just got done wiring this up this afternoon, and I haven't really programmed much. Really, all I'm doing is I'm playing. I've got a little bit of a tape echo, and then that blue note pedal. I'm just using that. And a little bit of reverb out of the H9. All my cool sounds that I used to have are kind of gone by the wayside, as I had to tear it all apart and then put it back together. So part of what I'm going to be doing here pretty soon is just doing a big rebuild on my sounds. All right. I just realized something. Hey, if you guys can hear the guitar sound here, let's get rid of this overlay here. Ta-da. I'm having a little bit of, I've got the Iridium plugged into my interface. So you're getting a little bit of my amp sound and you're getting a little bit of the pedalboard sound. So I'm kind of curious what that sounds like. A little bit of direct. Hopefully it sounds cool. All right. As you guys come in, kind of let me know what's up. Ask any questions if you got them. And also let me know like what the guitar sounds like. If I need to kind of turn off the Iridium part, I will. There's no sound check on this stuff. Also. So what I was going to do today, as far as the teaching part of this, is I was going to talk about taking the information that we learned over the last couple of weeks. We talked about the CAGED system root patterns. We built major scales within them. And then out of those major scales, we learned your arpeggios, your chord patterns, or chord shapes, major, and then how to manipulate them to make minor, diminished and augmented triads. What I thought we could do today, and I'll do this on the page here. One of these guys is the page. There we go. Let's talk about the differences with modes. I think maybe one of the first things I can do here is let's do just a blank piece of paper here for a minute. All right, one of the things we talked about last time was the fact that we have 7 notes in a scale, right? So say we're doing C major, and this is going to be all naturals because that's what C major is the key without any kind of sharps or flats. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then C again. All right. In each of those, that's the one or the root. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. This guy's all back to the root. Right? We talked about how we have half steps between the 3rd and 4th note and the 7th and the 8th note. When we play through that collection of notes, so say I start on the C here, root, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then root again. We get a sound that's pretty recognizable to anyone who's grown up mostly on planet Earth, but especially in Western cultures. And it's a major scale, right? And what makes that sound happen is the distances that each of these notes are from each other. But if we were to start changing that, we would start getting other scale sounds. One of the first things we can do is if we move half steps around. So let's do this. Let's play this one in purple. So everything's the same, except we're going to put our half steps between the 3rd and 4th note and the 6th and 7th note. Okay, so we put our little half step markers here. All right. This gives us a dominant sound, or what we call the Mixolydian scale. Oops, hang on a second. All right, and that's what we'd play over just if we were playing like a good old C7 chord. Right? Versus that's major. That's Mixolydian. Right. We're going to demonstrate the difference in sounds in a little bit. We're just going to kind of talk about construction right now. All right. One of the other things that we can do, let's say we can put the half steps between 2 and 3. And 5 and 6, which means that we also have a B flat right there. All right, so this is major scale. This guy right here is Mixolydian. Probably could have done this a little bit more coherently. This one right here is just your Aeolian mode, which is also just your good old-fashioned minor scale. All right, and that one sounds like this. You can hear the difference between minor and major. Right. What it comes down to is as you move the distances between the notes around, you get different sounds out of them. All right. If we were to just make a shorthand list of each of the modes, because there's a mode that's built off of each note in a major scale. All right, so one of the easy things to do is say, hey, major scale, Dorian is the 2nd mode, Phrygian is the 3rd mode, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. Whoops. apologize for you guys having to read my handwriting. So if I was to put half steps in the major between the third and fourth notes and the seventh and eighth, which is what we saw up there. All right, Dorian is between 2 and 3 and 6 and 7. Phrygian is between 1 and 2 and 5 and 6. Yeah, I had to think for a second. All right, Lydian is between 3 and 4. I'm sorry, I take that back. Between 4 and 5. And 7 and 8. Mixolydian is between 3 and 4 and 6 and 7. Aeolian is between 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. And then Locrian is between 1 and 2 and 4 and 5. We're going to build these here in a second. We'll demonstrate not only what they look like on the page, but what they sound like. One of the important things that we always talk about with this stuff is the idea that you have to understand a sound or a scale or a theoretical idea on the instrument, not just as a pattern of places to put your finger, but as a sound, and also the construction of it. If you understand how we make this work and what notes are important, that unlocks your ability to use the sound. Because what happens is a lot of times people say, oh, hey, it's D Dorian. All right, and D Dorian, I'll pull up a Dorian backing track. Oops. I'll post links to all these tracks that I'm working with later. Actually, maybe I should. Well, so I got a series of these guys. I'll put D Dorian going here. I'll post it later, otherwise I'll sit here messing with this. All right, but D Dorian is a sound. Right, and it's part of the reason why it's that sound, even though it's the same notes as C major, is that we're using the notes of the D minor chord as kind of like the framework for those. All right, if I was to play C major, right, it never resolves because you have this thing going on. One of them is the idea that we've spoken about in previous lessons, where notes either have a certain amount of tension in them, where it wants to move on, or there's no tension and it just wants to resolve, right? If you're thinking about this as D Dorian, you've actually got an idea of where the notes for the resolutions are, and then you can array the other notes around them and get that sound easier. Right, that's a very Dorian sound, right? But if I use those same notes, right, same notes, but I'm treating the C major as the parent triad, and now I've actually got the sound of a major scale. All right, so we're gonna talk about how to construct these scales today. We may spend a little bit of time about how to get the sound, but then we're going to talk about when you're actually improvising or soloing with these scales, what you have to do to actually make it sound like that. Because I don't need the backing track to make that sound like Dorian or major, and that same group of notes could be Lydian or Phrygian. Or just regular natural minor. it's really just comes down to my ability to extract that sound out of that collection of notes, right? More on that in a little bit. So I'm going to stop here. If anybody has any questions, please hit me up. If not, I will keep rolling. So, oops. One of these. Oops. Yeah, a second here. Blank nickel. Okay. So what? I guess one of the things I can do for us right now is let's build a major scale. So here are my roots. We'll do it in the C root pattern. If you don't remember how this stuff works in terms of root patterns and scale construction, you can always go back to the previous lessons I've done. Linked below this, once I'm done with this, there'll be links to the original pre-recorded lesson videos on CAGED system, on scale construction, on modes, all that stuff. This is also the 4th video in a series of live lessons where we're kind of taking a different tack in terms of teaching this stuff. And this is also, so the 2 video series together, I think will work pretty good for you. But I'll have that stuff posted below. So if you get lost a little bit, ask questions. I can always help you out in real time, but also you also have the ability to you know, go back and check out the other lessons I've got here. All right, so just from what we did previously, major scale out of this, we went whole step to the 2nd note, whole step to 3, half step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7, half step to the root. Remember we talked about in the last lesson, the roots you can always just go a half step below and put your 7 there. All right, because it's always a half step between those 2 in the major scale. Remember that this is major. Whoops, would help if you guys could see what I'm doing here. Whoops. And then I'll just finish this guy up so you can see it. And this will be here for comparison. All right, I'll mark these half steps like we had previously when I just wrote the note names out. Now, if I wanted to make this, we'll take the same root pattern here. And the first thing that I did was I lowered the 7th note a half step. I put half steps, we'll do Mixolydian because this is kind of an easy one to look at. Get this different color. All right, so the half steps are going to be between 3 and 4 and 6 and 7. So as we do the construction on these guys, root 2, 3, half step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, now a half step to 7. We're going to call this a minor 7. We talked about this in the previous lesson. All right, and then root. We can go 2, 3, 4, 5, and then going backwards, whole step down to minor 7, because the half step is between minor 7 and 6. We've got 5, 4, and then 3. So if I mark the half steps in the diagram here, there's 1 there, then between 6 and 7, there's 3 and 4, 6, 7, 3 and 4. All right, and that's the note. That's the difference between basically a major chord and a dominant 7th or a 7th chord. All right, so this guy, we could play this over C major. Okay, and then this one would be over, put it here, C7. We can also take this, we're kind of working off the major scales right now. So if I wanted to, the next major scale variant is Lydian. Kind of a modern sound, right? And the half steps in Lydian are between 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. So put my roots here. So whole step to 2, whole step to 3. Instead of half step to 4 like we've had in all of these to this point, we're going to go whole step to sharp 4. which will be here. Or augmented fourth. We're going to call it the sharp 4 for right now. And then we've got a half step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7, and then there's our root. I'll continue this pattern: root, 2, 3, sharp 4, and then 5. And if going back from the lower root, 7, 6, 5, half step to sharp 4, and then 3. So we'll put our half step markers in here so you can see where this stuff is at. All right, and then the sound on this one, it's kind of a modern major sound. So instead of just major, we can do, so here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 root. We raise the fourth note a half step. That's the kind of funky modern note. If you guys are familiar with The Simpsons, I'll do it in this key. Right, the first batch of those notes, that's all from a Lydian scale. Goes. But anyway, so that's another major sound. So we've got, you know, off of this sound here, off of this major scale, we've learned how to make it a dominant scale by lowering that note, and then a Lydian scale by raising the fourth. Okay, that's a big favorite of Steve I. All right, I can take, I've got these backing tracks that are really just a major chord. And what's cool about playing over these for this exercise here is that they don't really infer any particular sound. So I can play C major. That's a sound. I can play the big Lydian sound. Play the Lydian sound. Alright. It's nice because it's kind of like a blank palette and you can kind of just work on like what notes do I have to hit, and I can still use the same vocabulary that I know from my major scale. I just adjust the notes to make sure they fit our new scale. There's also a combination scale called Lydian dominant, where it's got the minor 7 and the sharp 4. Alright, we'll save that one for when we talk about melodic minor scales, but there's a lot of variations on that. There's different things that you can do. Alright, anybody have any questions before I shift over to the minor sounds? Okay, so, oops. If we just do the regular old minor scale, which is Aeolian, is the mode name. It's also called natural minor. The half steps are between 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. So as I build it here on the page, got root, 2, and then I've got my half step. So we're lowering the third, so it's a minor third. Whole step to 4, whole step to 5, half step to our minor 6 because we have to lower the 6 to make it the half step. And then whole step to minor 7. If you notice that this guy is similar to that guy right there, it's in the same place. All right, then we got our root, and then we'll continue up. 2, minor 3, 4, 5, minor 6, and I'll go backwards from here. Root, minor 7, minor 6, 5, and 4. All right, and that gives us that's just D natural minor right there. All right, I can do the Dorian mode. All right, so Dorian, half steps are between 2 and 3 because it's also a minor sound, and then 6 and 7. So if I build that guy here, there's my root pattern. 2, then half. Oh, actually, let me go back and mark our half steps here. So 2 and 3, 5 and 6, 2 and 3, 5 and 6. Before I forget that. Minor third, whole step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, and then minor 7. That's where that other half step is. Then root 2, minor 3, whole step to 4, whole step to 5. Then we go backwards here. Root, minor 7. What am I thinking? Yeah, sorry. 6, 5, 4. So your half steps in this diagram here between 2 and 3, and then the 6 and the 7. And we talked about this Dorian sound earlier. Right, in this Dorian sound, it's like a modern or cooler version of the minor scale sound. I've actually got a couple lessons on basically soloing in that Dorian already. All right, so those are first 5 modes. What did I leave off here? Dorian. We don't have Phrygian or Locrian. Those are kind of everybody's 2 least favorite, and those just because they don't we don't use them as much when we play popular music. Oops, they're kind of strong sounds. So let's do Phrygian first. And people will say Phrygian, which has half steps between 1 and 2 and 5 and 6. They'll say this sounds kind of Spanish. So half step to minor 2. Here's minor 3. So that's a whole step to minor 3 there. Whole step to 4. Whole step to 5. Half step to minor 6. Whole step to minor 7. And then we continue on root 2, minor 3, 4, 5, minor 6. I feel like I did something wrong. Oh, I'm sorry. Sitting here talking, not paying attention. Minor 2, minor 3, 5, minor 6. I'll build this backwards. Ooh, my brain is not working. Minor 7, 5, and 4. All right, so this one, if I play it, and actually I did all that. I didn't show it to you guys. Sorry, that's the scale. So that's the Phrygian scale. And then the last one is Locrian. The one that we use really the least. Oops, actually let me do that in green. So we'll kind of keep the format going here. Right, so the half steps, I'll go back and catch the half steps on this guy too, just to kind of make sure that you see them. So half steps are in Locrian between 1 and 2, and 4 and 5. This is the only kind of diminished sounding scale that we're going to have. So here's our root pattern. We go minor 2, minor 3, 4, and then flat 5 we'll say. It's also a diminished fifth, but it's a little bit easier to do it this way. So flat 5, minor 6, minor 7. Kind of a messed up scale. Minor 2, minor 3, 4. There's the flatter diminished fifth, and then minor 6. And going backwards, minor 7, minor 6, flat 5, and 4. All right. This is kind of what we call a half diminished scale. Resolve. We don't really jam or play that on that much. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's important to get all this stuff here. Oops. Let's put in the half steps. Hopefully you guys can read this. All right. Anybody have any questions? Any comments? The whole thing is like we're building all these scales. And these are all modes of a major scale. All right, all of these modes actually fit in some other key, and we'll talk about that later on. Really all we're doing, though, is we're taking a look at how we can take these 7 notes that made up a major scale and how we can move them around to get these other sounds. It's just another way of looking at this sort of thing. If I go back to my backing track, so I talked a little bit about, like, over that major scale. All right, I've got, I can play a major sound, I can play a Mixolydian sound, I can play a Lydian sound, right? And they all sound kind of different. A lot of the time, those chords happen, or we play those modes because there's a couple chords that outline them. Like a Dorian sound, a lot of times, like we're playing in D Dorian, that's the 1 chord, and then the 4 chord would probably be some sort of like G major or G7. Like a Santana song. Right. And that, because those 2 chords are there, it kind of says, hey, that's a Dorian scale sound. You can't play other stuff because it's not going to fit. Right. The Mixolydian scale is going to be over a dominant 7. All right, so we could play something that's just really static, like a, dominant 7, okay. All right, so here's an A7. There's a minor 7. All right, if I tried to play major over this, not so great. Lydian. It just doesn't work, right? Because the chord's got all the notes that make up a Mixolydian sound. Even when I'm playing a Mixolydian sound, I'll add other notes. Right? But all I'm doing is I'm taking that scale sound and I'm playing other notes in a chromatic fashion. Like I'll connect 2 notes, like here's the 5th note of the scale and here's the minor 7. And as long as I start and end on a note in the chord then it still sounds like Mixolydian even though I got all this other stuff. I could even play weird stuff, and I've done this in the past where, you know, you just play really out there And as long as you return to the sound, you're still playing Mixolydian. You just kind of take a little step outside of the harmony. Lydian, a lot of times, like if I was playing A Lydian, I don't have a good backing track for that. Well, it's just in the YouTube machine. A Lydian backing track. Let's see what comes up. Smooth backing track in A Lydian. It'll probably be like an A and a B chord. And there's the B chord. I know those two chords together, they're actually going to sound like a Lydian. Whoops, played major there by accident. So, you know, if you've got one chord by itself, you can choose whatever sounds you want to play. If there's two or more chords, they're going to kind of dictate what you're playing, what kind of progression. I did a lesson on Miles Davis's solo on the song "So What," and in that song, he does this really cool thing where he doles out the sound a little bit at a time and mixes and matches sounds. Right, and create some structure that way. So if I was just to take one chord minor here, so we'll do this in D minor, so it's basically the Miles Davis thing, even though this is kind of a funkier kind of deal. Get it one time through. So I'll play the Miles solo, even though this is the wrong feel. I don't remember the rest of it, but he does this cool thing where he starts off and he basically just plays a power chord, just a D power chord, root, 5, root. And because he's only playing those notes, it really doesn't say anything about the chord. Is it major? Is it minor? Dorian? Whatever. The next thing he plays is he's basically playing the D minor triad, root, minor, 3, 5, with the 4th added. I've talked about this in the past where like we can use any triad with the 4th added, and it gives us the ability to make melodies out of something that would normally be pretty boring to listen to, because all the other notes, when you play an arpeggio, right, all those notes are the right notes. There's nothing interesting. There's no note with any energy, right? So he hits that 4, right, and that gives us something interesting that doesn't resolve to resolve from, and that makes the phrase. Did you take the trash out? Yeah, I took the trash out. It's very conversational. Takes the phrase and kind of doubles it up a little bit of development. All right, and then he adds minor 7 and 6. Those are the notes that would make it a Dorian sound. Now it's actually pretty interesting. All right, he's added something that actually says mode. Something like that. He adds the second note of the Dorian scale. Hits a major 7 there, right? So that's actually a melodic minor scale. All right, and then these notes, he's basically playing a C major triad over this D. But even though it's a C major triad, the notes are the minor 7, the 9, and the 11th, out of this Dorian sound. All right, so over this, what sounds like a major chord, a little bit more interesting because now they're colorful, they're color notes. So I can even take this idea. There's my first phrase, just a power chord. Alright, now I'm playing the minor triad with the 4 added. And essentially that's giving us minor pentatonic scale without the 7th note. Alright. If we actually add that minor 7 and we play the minor pentatonic scale, right, we actually get a different sound. There's the 9. What I did there is I'm playing the minor pentatonic, but I'm adding the 9th. Alright, and that gives us a different sound. But it's avoiding the 6th, right? If I play the major 6, right, that gives us the Dorian sound. I can play a minor 6 though. Changing the 6 actually gives us a couple different sounds we can work with. Or we can play the minor pentatonic and leave out the 9th. So it's Dorian without the 2nd note. It's also a minor 6 chord. A big part of how I look at this stuff is that I'm always trying to organize these notes so that I've actually got a way of creating interest while I'm soloing that's not just a lot of licks. Right? I'll play a solo. I'll play it over this. It's 1 chord. And what I'm hoping you'll hear is that I've got structure. I'm going to use the Miles Davis idea where I'm adding in notes. I might use different textures. I might play thirds or 6. I don't know. Maybe play some things in some intervals. But it's my ability to know the information we talked about earlier in the lesson and how to pull these sounds out of the scale, out of these notes. Because it's about sound, right? You can play all the scale patterns you want. And if we don't hear the sound that you're saying you're going for, then it doesn't really do you any good. All right, but if you can actually derive sounds out of these notes, and I'll think about it like I'm extracting the juice out of a piece of fruit, right? I've extracted the notes that actually make the sound specific. At that point, then I've got something that I can use. All right, so let's start this, and I'll start simple. I'll steal some of the Miles Davis junk just to start with. If I sit on a note, does it really want to go anywhere? Or is it static? Is it a good resting point? That note wants to go somewhere. That note got a little energy. That note, major 7, it's got a lot of energy. you play a minor scale, like a Dorian scale, but put the actually play a regular natural minor. Take out. Let's do the Dorian, but raise the 7th. That's called a melodic minor. So you get this minor Dorian, kind of jazzy sound. But you have the energy of that major 7. I can mix the blues scale with the Dorian. Alright, blues scale. There's the Dorian sound. I'll let you in on a secret. When I played that note the first time, I missed the note I was going for. But I figured, hey, you know what? I like that idea. Let's repeat it. Now I've got a sound. There's that flat 5 for the blues scale. That right there, I'm playing the minor pentatonic and then I move it up a half step. All totally wrong notes if you really want to look at it that way. But like I was saying before with the Mixolydian. Alright, if I start and end in the right place, whatever I play in the in-between doesn't really matter. Alright, and that's this idea of whether or not a note feels like a resolution or it's got some. I can play chromatically, so let's do this, right? I'll start on the G. That note doesn't really want to go anywhere because it's the root of the chord. That note, it's a half step away from a chord tone. When you're that close to a chord tone, the dissonance wants to pull you towards the chord tone. Alright, here's the 5th of that D chord. Right. That's the major 7. Up a half step into the root. It's a great sound. You can get a lot of use out of it when you're building a phrase. Because I can play, doesn't want to go anywhere, but that. Alright, major 3rd, that's really an ugly one there. Alright, so we have the root, we have the half step away from the root, we have the 9th. That guy kind of wants to go down too, not as bad. And it can also, if you have it an octave and higher, it's kind of nice to sit on. As we talked about in the Miles Davis solo. Alright, this note here is the minor 3rd. This is actually in the chord. It's a good sitting point. Alright, now you hear that I've got a phrase that makes sense, because I've got 2 chord tones, the note in the middle. It wants to release its tension into the root or into there's the fourth. We talked about that in the Miles Davis solo. It really wants to go up to the fifth or down to the minor third. There's the flat five. That guy really wants to go up. Or right, that's a half step above the fifth. A lot of tension for resolution. You can move it up into the major six. Not a whole lot. It's got a little bit more energy though. That doesn't mind going into the minor seven. Major seven. Alright. So it's not even about knowing theory at a certain point. At a certain point, it's like, what do your ears tell you? Because you can play any kind of phrase, and if the note feels resolved, then it's ended. Right? I used to fall into this problem where I would just play all the right notes in a scale, and it just wouldn't ever sound like anything. Right? Nothing wrong with that, but really there's nothing interesting there either. It's easy to get bored soloing that way. But once you're able to start doing this thing where you're listening to what the notes are doing against the chord. As a way of making the chord resolve nicer. I go away from it, ask a question, does something interesting, catches the ear, and then I bring it back to a safe note. Playing too many notes too fast and too regularly means we also don't get the flavor. Okay. That doesn't mean a whole lot, but you know, Miles Davis now we hear the sound of the scale. If you leave space in your line, we hear the notes more. But then it gives us another dimension to work in, which is the idea you fill those spaces. So say I'm going Miles Davis, 2, 3. 2, 3. You have the space, you fill it. And then when you do play more notes, they don't even have to be really that fast. But they fill the space a little bit more interesting. Alright, that last line, actually pretty boring sounding. And sloppy, but alright. There's nothing there really melodically. It really doesn't do much. Sometimes it's cool to it's like throwing gasoline on the fire. You know, or making it like you're kicking in the afterburner, and it's fun to play faster. But you know, for me, like if I was really doing something like that, might play it fast enough where you don't really hear it as subdivision. out of the harmony a little bit, or even play different harmony over it, like an A. Not super low crayon, it's also an altered dominant scale, sorry. And that wants to resolve really nicely to that D. It feels like I'm falling down until I resolve it. So I'm in the scale. Play the outside scale. Alright. And that's another way where I can make longer lines interesting, is by playing and superimposing other scales. So you guys have to give me a little bit of feedback. Let me know, because I'm kind of throwing a lot of stuff out there. And even if you're not understanding the scale references, or you're not able to play or even hear everything I'm talking about, hopefully this idea that structure comes from you manipulating the elements of whatever you're playing becomes apparent to you, right? A lot of what we do when I talk about things in this fashion is I'm kind of, I wouldn't expect anyone to watch the last 20 minutes of this and go, oh, I can do all that. But what I would do or expect is that somebody could watch that and go, hey, you know what? That's a completely different way of looking at my scales than just playing the scale pattern that I wrote out on the page and memorized. Because that was me for a lot of years. It's just, yeah, oh, I'm playing the scale pattern. Why doesn't it sound like anything? And the reality is that once I was able to break it down into the notes that make the interesting stuff, at that point, I had something to manipulate and something to work with. I had better tools and better raw materials to play with. All right. If I'm playing over a blues, let's go back to that G jump thing I was playing with at the beginning here. You know, I can mess around with something like this. All right, it's the same idea. I can play just the blues scale. It'll sound just fine. All right, or I can start adding some of the other sounds I'll use. Major pentatonic. We use it over the 1 chord. Now I go back to minor pentatonic over the 4 chord. I've got, you know, playing over a blues, I've got a lot of vocabulary. And what it comes from is learning other people's stuff and trying to figure out what they're doing. And then also, like, studying the theoretical stuff, it gives me a way of organizing these thoughts in ways that actually make sense. So another method of organization over something like this, I can think, hey, let's start B.B. King. Right, I've got kind of a vocabulary. B.B. King. If I want to do the Albert King. Charlie Parker. Right, that pull-off lick comes from an Eddie Cochran tune, Rockabilly. Killing Floor. I just took the riff and I'll use it for my solo. That last bit, I talked about this, I think, in the last lesson, was all right. That's a piano lick out of a Stevie Ray Vaughan tune. I think out of Houses a Rockin', off his last studio album. But your sound comes from all the stuff that you hear that you like, and all the stuff that you hear that you don't like. All right, that informs your judgments. You learn melodies and licks and ideas from people. You kind of organize it in your head. It kind of breaks down like soup. And then, what comes out ends up being you. And you can hear like Stevie Ray Vaughan. And you could hear like there's Buddy Guy. And, there's his Hendrix influence. And there's his B.B. King influence. And there's his Lonnie Mack. You hear all that stuff come out in his playing, but it still sounds like him. Hey, Jeff. Man, I've been talking for an hour and you're the first person to say hi. Yeah, and then Clapton. It's funny you mentioned Clapton, Beck, and Page, and when I think about those players, let me get Jeff out of my face. Clapton's got a sound. He's got a couple sounds actually. Page has got a sound. And Beck has definitely got a sound, right? And you could just take those three players and say, hey, what makes those guys sound differently? Steal bits of it, like with Beck. He likes microtonal stuff, the whammy bar. He plays with his fingers. Right. All right. When I'm thinking about Clapton, I'm usually thinking about just pentatonic. All right. And then with Page, still kind of pentatonic, but he treats things differently. And like he'll play like that pentatonic, and he'll hit chord tones a little bit more specifically than the other two guys. Like when he's playing a slow blues, or he's got these. He'll play pentatonic ideas that are pretty cool, and then add like in Stairway to Heaven. Oops, let me get rid of Jeff here. Sorry, Jeff. All right, that first solo from Stairway to Heaven's all minor pentatonic, and then he hits an F right there, which is out of the minor scale. It's also out of the chord progression. Right, so he's kind of aware of the notes that are actually interesting in the chord progressions that he's playing over, and he nails them. And that kind of harmonic awareness, you don't really hear it ever from Clapton, almost never. And then Beck's got kind of a different approach to those things. But that's kind of what I'm talking about. Is you're really you can listen to anybody and try and pull something out of what they're doing, and learn from that. Hey, Rich. Sorry, today's a little bit more. I kind of bailed out of the fretboard stuff after the first half hour because there's only a couple people here. Nobody was asking any questions, so I've been kind of talking about how we organize musical ideas to make our own sounds, and part of that is this idea of modes. I love this thing where you can basically take any element of a solo and turn it into something else. All right, but you have to have a little bit more command of the fretboard. Right, so I kind of bailed out. I've got hey Rich, have you checked out the other live lessons I've done in this series? I've been trying to I don't know, I'm trying to go through how I would present this stuff in a class or with a private student, but also kind of veer off and talk about how I would use it in a practical sense. Today was like a giant left turn. But ultimately, like if you know, like with the CAGED system stuff, when we talk about scales, root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 root, right? I know that scale there is the same as there, some of that. It's all the same thing. So if I've got a melody that goes root 4, 3, 5, right, I can play it root 4, 3, 5, root 4, 4, 3, 5. I can do it in any of these positions. All right, because I know what those notes are relative to each other. So then I can actually, you know, say I'm playing. Back to the D minor guy here. Oops, I'm the wrong thing. So say I've got my, doing this in D. All right, I can actually use that to make melodies. I played that idea here, right, and then I kind of turned the notes around in another place. So I went up an octave, developed it that way, and then I resolved it differently. Oops. And then I played the notes differently one more time to resolve it. All right, so any place I play, fretboard's pretty open and it allows me to move ideas through it. It's not just like I only know these licks, because you know the first probably half of my guitar playing life, everything was about like I'm going to memorize all these licks. The problem is that each of those licks would kind of exist in a vacuum, and I can only play those ideas where I knew them, and sometimes only in the key that I knew them. All right, and it took me a long time to get to the point where everything just kind of breaks down, and I'm able to take an idea from one place on the fretboard or one key or one rhythm and move it into some other place or manipulate it so it becomes a development. It's kind of, you know, it's kind of a jazz improvisation thing, but you know, if you're another instrumentalist in jazz, you don't have the guitar fretboard to contend with. All right, so they play things pretty differently, and on guitar, to play something that's simple on a saxophone sometimes is really a pain in the ass. But as you're able to do it all over the fretboard, suddenly it opens things up and you can do a lot more. On the other hand, there's things on guitar that are easy to play that are really hard on those instruments. So it's, you know, 6 1/2 dozen of the other. But, you know, having to basically take in music from other realms and turn it into something that's listenable or useful has been one of the best things. Like when I play cover gigs, or if I've had to do like, before the shutdown, I was playing like the calypso and reggae gigs. I do the occasional like country recording thing. All of that stuff basically turns into just raw material for what I normally do. And I think I've got a kind of a sound that's a little bit different. You know, I'm a half-ass country player, I'm a half-ass blues player, I'm a half-ass rock player, but I'm a whole-ass Mark player. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like all these things that I'm interested in that I can do, especially jazz. I'm not a very good jazz player at all, because jazz is one of those things that takes a lot more commitment. You know, the level of sophistication and the level of technique and ability and the training of your oral imagination, your ability to audiate music, all that stuff is, it takes just daily work when you play jazz, and I just don't have the time or really the passion for it, even though my musical degree is in jazz guitar performance. Let me open up for questions real quick. And And what is stitch method, actually, Rich? Hey, since you guys are here answering questions, what does the guitar sound like tonight? I'm playing both through my amplifier. I'm going to show off my pedal board again. Ta-da! It's actually put back together, but not very well programmed. But I'm just playing through the my Sir Badger 30, and I'm using the J-Rocket Blue Note. If I just go straight clean, that's just the amp sound, or it's also the Iridium, or maybe a mixture of both online. Here's the Blue Note. I'll give you guys a little tour. Here's the Archer. That's kind of like the Klon kind of thing. Let me shut off the delay here. A lot of these sounds are pretty clean, but what I find is that, like, the Blue Note, right, that gives me kind of a like a fatter single note thing that works really good for the blues. But if I'm playing chords, like I'm doing like a rock and roll rhythm thing, it doesn't really cut as much. Whereas the Archer, which is like a Klon, that gives me a little bit more beef than the clean sound. But then it's also got a little bit more upper mid-range. Alright, so that's, you know, it's funny because I got this all put together and I'd never really played all these pedals together. Once I did, I was like, wow, this all kind of sounds the same. But then I realized the things I liked about these pedals individually means that they'll be really useful in a gig. This is the Revival drive. It's a really big one on the left. This one I'm struggling a little bit with, like how it sounds. That's the left side. Here's the right side. All right, so that's supposed to be like that's like a 68 Marshall cranked up. This is like JTM 45 or an older Marshall. This is the dude pedal. Right, this dude pedal is basically my lead sound on stage. I usually have it cranked up. It's supposed to be like a Dumble amp. Rich says that looks super complicated. It is kind of complicated. What it comes down to is that, actually, let's get rid of this picture here. Whoops, it's not what we wanted. Actually, get rid of both these. Turn this guy around here. Theoretically, this will work. Oops, that's the wrong pedal board. My little one. Okay. All right. So the deal here is that this big one here, my foot going over it, that's the controller for everything, right? It's a loop switcher. So what I've got is, and you can kind of see as I hit this, I get different patches. And what it's doing is it's turning on a lot of these pedals, the overdrive pedals, are in loops here, so that when I hit this, it basically just turns on my compressor. This is just an amp clean with a little bit of reverb. This is this Blue Note one just by itself. This is this one, the Archer. That's this guy here with two different flavors of Marshall. This is the lead sound with the dude pedal. Also makes a good, like, kind of a good 80s rock thing. Right now, this is just the phaser, my Phase 90. And that's there so I can, like, change the rate with my foot. And then this here, there's a Sir Riot pedal up here that's like my main. Distortion. Some of these are kind of new, but what happens is after this, then it goes out to the Strymon Mobius, which has like all my choruses and okay. Let me turn this on clean for a second. And it controls it through MIDI. All right. All that kind of stuff. Envelope filter. The phaser on here I don't like. Whoops. It's hard to hit two buttons without a shoe. Here's my rotary speaker. Yeah, actually, Jeff, it is exactly like it's presets. So there's my Leslie. Here's my tremolo. Here's my chorus. Alright. That all gets switched by this in MIDI, but all my programs are screwed up right now, so it's not doing it. So when I hit something here, it could turn on any pedals I want. It'll change this to whatever modulation I want. This here, this is my delay. It's also supposed to be programmed and switched, but it's not up right now. And then I can tap in tempos here. So if someone's counting off a tune, 1, 2, 3, 4. I wonder if I can get to. Hang on a second here. A lot of my sounds are screwed up. It's got a million sounds in it. I just don't have this stuff set up right now. The H9 here has got like delays and reverb. This is my main reverb. I also use it for like some funky synthy kind of sounds. I wonder if I got one of these set up here. Nope. It's all messed up. Anyway, so it goes from there, and it goes out to here where that red light is, and that basically is just a splitter. So it sends one side out to my amplifier, and then the other side goes to the Strymon Iridium right here. All right, and that basically is it's like an amp modeler with an impulse response cabinet simulator. So basically, it's like a really good amp modeler, and I've got it set up so it's literally just like a clean Marshall, which is kind of like what my main amp is. And then that goes out to the PA when I'm on a gig, so we don't have to put a microphone on my amp, or it goes directly into my recording interface, which is what's going on right now. So that's one reason why you're hearing it there. Like if I turn off my amp, that was weird. Oops, sorry guys. So I turn this off, you guys will probably hear. That's just the original. And then here's so anyway, I like it. It's a cool setup. Well, I wear big shoes, actually. I usually don't. I usually wear shoes on stage because most of the places I play are kind of crappy. But I work in my garage, so outside of going for a walk with my wife today, I haven't worn shoes at all today. It's weird. It's like the whole like work at home pandemic kind of thing where you literally just wear like comfortable clothes and no shoes for a year. Okay, so it says none of these are full of multiple. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the really big thing is a Boss ES8 pedal, which is just it's a loop switcher, and so it's got kind of a computer in it that'll it'll select whatever effects you want. It'll combine them. You can put them in different orders if you want to. If you want your distortion before your chorus, or you want to put your chorus before your distortion, whatever, you can change the routing within the box. You can send it out to two amplifiers. It's sending an out separate to my tuner. It does a lot of stuff. It's a really cool box. There's some really expensive ones that do a lot more, but this actually does more than enough for my needs. But then through MIDI, which if you guys know what MIDI is, it's been around since the 80s, and it's the musical instrument language, basically, which it was originally for controlling keyboards. But we use it for guitar processors now, and basically it sends a signal out, and there's 3 channels, almost like radio channels. Channel number 1 is my Mobius, which is the big blue box. Actually, let's give you guys back this. So the big blue box over here, that's the one that has all my chorus and modulation effects and tremolo and Leslie and stuff. MIDI channel 2 is my timeline, which is most of my delays, digital, analog, tape, all that kind of stuff. MIDI channel 3 is for the Eventide H9, which will do harmonizer stuff, synthesizer stuff, but I especially love the reverbs. I use it as a reverb most of the time. It's got delays, and it's got a lot of the sounds from the vintage Eventide sounds from the 80s and 90s, like Van Halen records and all the studio stuff. You can get those sounds. And then channel 4 is going to be for the Iridium. And the cool thing is the Iridium, basically it's got 3 amp models. It's got basically like a Fender Deluxe reverb, a Vox AC30, and a Marshall, like a Plexi Marshall. And what you can do with the MIDI, which I haven't set up or even tried yet, is that I can, if I decide that, hey, my crunch sounds better with the Marshall, I can have it send and turn on the Marshall, and then it's got 3 speaker cabinets you can have in there. There's a 412, and there's a 112 with a certain kind of speaker and some other stuff. So I can change the amp and the speaker cabinet digitally in here. And then it goes out to the PA through the direct box. And maybe my clean sound wants to be a Fender kind of sound, so I can switch that. So my sound going out to the PA or into the recording interface can change. I can just change amps and speakers through there. I don't know how to do that quite yet, but it's all set. It's all wired up to do that. So it is a lot, but the kind of gigs that I play, it'd be really cool to just show up with a guitar and an amp and plug into it and go. But I play like rock and like cover gigs where over the course of the night I'll play everything from Elvis or maybe even like a jazz tune to Green Day or and there'll be disco and there'll be country and Americana and 80s rock and anything that people want to dance to, right? So for me, I'm not going to get exact sounds, but I can get approximations of sounds. If I need to sound like Rolling Stones 1 minute, and Def Leppard the next, and then an Elvis tune the one after that, I can get you in the ballpark, and I think it sounds pretty good. Now there's digital modeling stuff that actually does all that stuff for you. I just don't particularly like the sounds. I like this because I get the sounds that actually make me happy. So, Jeff, I'm actually I'm gonna go back to Rich for a second. The funny thing is that most guitar players never really used MIDI unless you're doing like a big rack system or something like that. MIDI's wasn't a guitar thing really until the 90s, and especially in the 2000s. So thank you guys for the kind words on the sounds. I literally just wired this up and plugged it in, so I haven't really gotten a chance to, I made sure everything worked, but I haven't listened to anything. Some of the sounds are left over from before I tore it all apart and put new pedals in. So I'm actually going to go back and listen to this video and see what it sounds like. But, over the next couple weeks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tailor all these sounds, get good reverb and delay sounds, and make sure that I have access to, the chorus or phaser, like any of those sounds I would normally use on a gig. Make sure they're available. I'm really looking forward to the idea that maybe in a couple months I'll be able to start playing out again. And this has been one of the things I've done to keep my sanity, is literally rebuild my live rig and prepare to go back out and play. This Telecaster is a great sounding guitar. It's not the most rock guitar, so I usually use this for the first set of a night, maybe the second one. And then as we get into heavier sounds, I'll pull out my Les Paul or like one of the other guitars, like the Paul Reed Smith or my Mark McFeely guitar, with the humbuckers, and then they'll drive the amp a little harder and they'll sound a little bit bigger. But this guitar, like, I could sit here and play the heavier sounds and they don't sound shrill or crappy like most Telecasters. But I love this guitar, and it's like not an expensive guitar. It's really it's basically it's a 60th anniversary Strat, but our Telecaster. But honestly, it's an American standard Telecaster with Jimmy Vaughn, the Tex-Mex pickups in it, which are like, I think they're made in Mexico. But you know, sometimes you get a guitar or an instrument that isn't necessarily expensive or custom made or any of that stuff, and it's just the right combination of stuff that makes you happy. I've been playing this guitar more and more and more. You know, sometimes, like, if I turn on like real high gain sounds, you'll start getting noise with it because the single coils. I'm eventually going to get a Reverend makes a Greg Koch model. It looks like a Telecaster called the Gristle Master, but it's got the Fishman Fluence pickups in it, which are like these new technology. They're kind of active. It's got a lithium-ion battery in it and everything, but they're noiseless and they sound like vintage pickups, and they're really cool. So I'm looking forward to. Hopefully, I'll have that in the next month or two. And then I get these Telecaster sounds, like even the high gain sounds, without really having too much of the noise that, especially like in a bar, like if you're on a stage and you're next to a neon beer sign and there's flat screen TVs everywhere, it generally tends to make a lot of noise issues that don't make band leaders happy, especially with the high gain sounds. So that's that. You guys have any other questions? I'm probably gonna I should split. My wife would probably like to see me and say hi. But this was kind of fun. Actually, I had more fun talking about my pedal board and my amp stuff than the theory tonight. Saturday we'll be back. Probably talk about pentatonic scales. I'm thinking that might be a good next step, and probably the last in this series of fretboard things. And basically, it'll be about taking the scales you already know and pulling certain notes out, and voila, you've got a major pentatonic or a minor pentatonic, and then how you can use those things in different settings. So that'll be kind of what's coming up here next on Saturday morning. Remember that these things are all they're all stored. You guys can get them at any time. I'll post the links to the previous lessons down below. If you like this, please hit the thumbs up or like it. You know, if you want more of these lessons, please subscribe and then hit the notification button. All that stuff, it helps you get my new content. I've got new videos. I've got a power chord fretboard video that's in the works with backing tracks. There'll be a full like pedalboard tour, like actually nicely produced, in the coming weeks. And then I'm probably going to change directions on the pre-produced videos. I haven't entirely decided what to do yet. So if you have anything you're interested in, leave it in the comments below, and I can kind of steer the lesson material towards that. Things are kind of opening up because I've covered a lot of what I've needed to over the past year for basically the library of important lessons. And then if you subscribe and you hit the notification bell, then you'll every time I go live with something like this or put out a video, you'll get a notice so you won't miss anything. So that's pretty much it. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night, and I will see you soon.